So, the HMS Indomitable was released this week on January 2nd, and it is in fact a ship. But on a serious note, this is a premium that we have not seen in the game for a very long time, and it's something that I feel needs to be addressed, because this is a ship that I don't personally think was ready to be released, and you as the consumer for this game need to be aware of what you might potentially be buying, or what you might want to go ahead and skip over. So, let's go ahead and get into the ship itself. First off, thank you to Wargaming for providing this ship to me free of charge for the purposes of review and testing. Now, when I talk about the Indomitable, I will be comparing her most similarly to the Implacable, the current British Tech Tree Tier 8 aircraft carrier. These ships share very similar characteristics in their rocket and dive bombers. However, the biggest difference we will see with the Indomitable is her lack of torpedo bombers. This ship trades her torpedo bombers to have significantly increased speed on the planes that she is carrying. Now, currently these planes are the fastest in the game, however, we have to ask ourselves, is that trade-off worth it? Is it worth the plane speed for removing my torpedo bombers? And quite frankly, no. Not even remotely close. By removing torpedoes from the loadout of this carrier, what happens is that the carrier is lacking a vital tool for doing consistent and significant damage to priority targets. By limiting itself to rockets and bombers only, the Indomitable loses any alpha strike and is forced to rely upon fire damage as a method of attack. Furthermore, while the rocket and level bombers are faster than Implacable, they have less ordnance to drop and have a lower alpha damage potential on top of the missing torpedo bombers. And with this, however, there is a somewhat silver lining. The Indomitable does have a little bit increased accuracy on its drops over the Implacable to make up for the missing bombs and rockets. Now, the bombs that the Indomitable uses are going to be identical to those found on the Implacable. However, the Implacable has 8 bombs per plane compared to 6 on the Indomitable. Now, when combining the plane health with the speed of these planes, the Indomitable is able to get off far more successful and easier strikes with its dive bombers. This does mean that they are generally more effective than those found on the Implacable. However, without the threat of torpedo bombers, many issues are created from the ship, and which really stems from a lack of any noticeable teeth that the carrier has. The ship has to rely heavily upon RNG to score alpha damage and fires on targets. In my playtesting, it's not uncommon to score a very small amount of bomb hits on a target or miss them altogether. Pair this with the only okay fire chance, and the ship can have a very frustrating experience. With only having 4 planes in an attack group, multiple attacks on a ship are almost impossible against all but the worst AA ships in the game, likely limiting yourself to 1 drop before having to relaunch planes. Now, the rockets on the Indomitable themselves are okay at best. These are not the monsters we find on the Tier 10 Audacious, and while they can present a nice amount of damage on cruisers and destroyers, their uses are severely limited, forcing you to fall back on the dive bombers most of the time. In my personal opinion, the ship is severely lacking in damage output and is likely the worst Tier 8 carrier in the game right now. Now, another major issue present on the ship, which may not be noticeable at first, is a severe lack in fun factor. For those who know me, I generally find carriers to be a highly repetitive class. They basically do the same thing over and over again. It's a very repetitive loop, and it leads to burnout quickly and a lack of fun derived from playing the aircraft carrier. With Indomitable, by trading out the torpedo bombers, the ship relies upon its dive bombers for damage. Rockets are mainly an afterthought. This means that most of the time, you launch your dive bombers, you drop a target, and you call the planes back. And then you start over again. It's a constant cycle of fly across the map, launch an attack, and repeat. It's highly repetitive, and this isn't a class of ships which has major repetition issues already. When we combine this with the severe lack of firepower, adding a stale gameplay loop to a ship severely hurts any desire for me to play this thing, and it's most likely going to remain a port queen. Considering we haven't seen this ship in several months, and with massive meta changes in CV gameplay over the last half year, I would say this ship was never ready for release in the first place. And with that being the case, I cannot recommend this ship to anyone, and would either skip this ship altogether or wait for a substantial buff in the possible future to make her viable amongst her peers. Now guys, this is going to be a short video today, but that's really all that I have to say. Given the general nature, carriers do not provide much in terms of nuance that I can go into, and by removing one type of plane from this carrier removes even more possibility for dynamic gameplay. So quite frankly, there's just not much to say other than this ship is too weak to be released in my eyes. Now, if you guys did go forward with purchasing this ship, I will be going over my current captain build and port, and any other attributes about the ship that you may find interesting. Other than that, guys, I will be seeing you all later. Have a good one. I'm out. Alright, so moving on to the port section of the video, I'll go over my captain build, recommended upgrades, and other interesting tidbits about the ship. Now, for this being a premium, there is nothing that you need to research or upgrade, and because it is an aircraft carrier, there is no choice of consumables. For the upgrades, these are pretty standard. There's only one aircraft-specific one in each slot, and I would definitely recommend taking that one over anything else. However, on this one, you have the choice of increasing the health of the rocket planes or the bombers. Because the bombers are your main source of damage with this ship, I would recommend increasing their health over the health of the rockets. Plus, you have fewer of these, and so you want to have them survive as long as possible when compared to the rockets. For this one, I would definitely not recommend the concealment because this increases the amount of your planes on deck. So instead of only having 8 dive bombers, you now get 10, and so that is a huge increase over just 10% of concealment. For my captain right now, how I would start off the build is I would start with Last of Gas and then move into improved engines, aircraft armor, survivability expert, and demo expert. And then lastly, I would pick up improved engine boost. Now you can see this isn't a perfect captain. It does share with my Audacious because I am using torpedo acceleration. The Indomitable is not a ship that has too many skills that it can take advantage of. However, Concealment Expert would be nice in protecting the ship itself. The ship is fairly stealthy for an aircraft carrier at 13.1 kilometers, and so if you do have Concealment Expert, you are going to get that down to about 11.8, 11.7, which is fairly good and will protect your ship quite often. Sight stabilization is another carrier main feature. However, this is only recommended for ships with torpedo bombers, and quite frankly, I wouldn't even recommend it for most carriers. So for this skill, I would just skip out on it all together. You don't really have an issue with lining up drops with the rocket planes or the dive bombers, so it's not going to benefit you that much. So with extra points lying around, then I would pick up Adrenaline Rush, Improved Engine Boost, and Air Supremacy. With this captain, I really just have too many points laying around, so I just pick up Priority Target as well. For the ship's armor, this is an okay armored ship for a tier 8 carrier. You do have the armored flight deck that British carriers have at tier 8, so this 38mm will protect you from quite a large amount of high explosive, as well as all armor piercing in the game, as well as this 70mm or 76mm section will protect you from significantly more amounts of high explosive. As far as the rest of the ship, you're looking at 19 to 21mm of plating. 21mm will block a 5-inch gun, 19, however, will not in terms of high explosive. The Citadel is pretty large and raised, so if you do have the opportunity to shoot at this thing, you should be able to score significant amounts of damage. So all in all, not the best armored carrier that we have, but not the worst. It's okay for a tier 8, but you don't want to be getting shot at. In terms of health pool, you're actually at 54,200. That is with Survivability Expert, but every carrier should be running Survivability Expert, and so that is just basically middle of the road. It's nothing special in my eyes, especially when you compare it to something like the tier 10s, which I know those are higher, but it's okay. You're not going to tank with this ship. You never will. That's not the point. Your point is to hide, so In terms of AA, it's all right. The biggest source of your AA is actually going to be the fighters that hover over you at all times. Speed is a little bad at 30.5 knots, but it shouldn't be too much of an issue if you are maintaining proper range away from enemy teams. And because your planes are decently fast, you do have the ability to get them across the map quickly. The biggest problem you'll notice in port, however, is the regen speed of planes. So if you look at your dive bombers, they have a regen speed of 106 seconds per dive bomber. With only having 10 of them on the deck to start a game with, if you run into too much AA and you lose your planes, you will have a very hard time recovering in the ship. So definitely recommend caution at first. Other than that, though, that should be it for the Indomitable, guys. So thank you all for watching. Remember, I am live on Twitch most days at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you want to catch me, I will put the link in the description. I will see you all later. Have a great one. I'm out.